Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Haimo Award presentations. I want to go ahead and tell you a little bit about the Haimo Awards and then introduce our first awardee. So the Deborah and Franklin Tepper Haimo Awards for Distinguished College or University Teaching of Mathematics honor college or university teachers who have been widely recognized as extraordinarily successful and whose teaching effectiveness has been shown to have had influence beyond their own institutions. At least 2 of the 3 awardees each year must be a nominee from the MAA section. Over the next 80 minutes, we're going to hear from 3 extraordinarily successful teachers, Drs. Carol Schumacher, Sarah Cook, and Adriana Salerno. I'll introduce each briefly before her presentation, and I encourage you to see the MAA prize booklet online for the full award citation for each of our awardees. So let me start with Dr. Carol Schumacher. Dr. Carol Schumacher is recognized for her excellent teaching for more than 30 years at Kenyon College. We're getting to know her students both as young mathematicians and as human beings has been a hallmark of her teaching and mentorship. Building these connections establishes a community with the students that helps launch them on their future paths. However, her impact on mathematics is much greater than the sum of the students that she has taught, as she has been involved with MAA Project Next, New Experiences in Teaching, since its inception. Shortly after earning tenure, she is a national leader in the use of inquiry-based learning in the post-secondary mathematics classroom, having authored 2 texts and facilitated countless workshops. Dr. Schumacher served more than a decade as a member of the MAA's committee on the undergraduate program in mathematics. While chairing this committee, she initiated the process that led to the 2015 CUPM curriculum guide for majors in the mathematical sciences. Dr. Schumacher has had a profound impact on multitudes of students directly as a faculty member at Kenyon College, through her mentorship of the inspiration to faculty through MAA Project Next and the IBL community, and as a driving force behind the 2015 CUPM curriculum guide. Please help me in joining Dr. Carol Schumacher.
Thanks so much. Well, thank you so much for that wonderful introduction. I can't express what an honor it is to be listed among the Haimo winners. The list is an awesome number of people that I consider to be teachers and mentors and friends that I've looked up to my whole career, and I'm so grateful to be awarded this award. So I have to confess something, and that is that I have long thought that the real downside to getting the Haimo Award was to have to give one of these talks, which I think of as the scariest talk anybody should ever ask you to give. And let me tell you why, because I am speaking to some of the greatest math teachers on the planet, and it has just been very publicly announced that I have something important to tell you. So when I first got the award, I was talking to my husband about this, and I said, well, it's this very scary talk to give. And he said, well, what do people talk about in their Haimo talks? And I said, well, Francis Sue's Haimo talk was the lesson of grace in teaching. And he said, you are in so much trouble. I kid you not, this is what he said. But seriously, if you haven't read or heard the lesson of grace in teaching, it's a profound piece of mathematical writing about what it is we do in the classroom. And I have certainly taken much of that and brought it into my classroom. And that kind of brings me to the theme of the talk, which is that in my experience as a teacher, all the good things that have come in the classroom have come from listening to other people. And so I want to spend some time talking about what lessons I have learned about teaching by listening to others. For all of us, our first mentors and our first role models for teaching were often our very best teachers. The person on the left, next to me, it was a few years ago, neither of us looks quite like that anymore, is Bob Esslinger. I'm very excited that he's here today to cheer me on. And he was my undergraduate mentor. There he is, a great teacher. And I'll tell you, I am certainly not going to tell you everything that he taught me about teaching because that would take a long time, but I do want one big takeaway. And that is that what I learned from Bob Esslinger is that at its core, mathematics is about deep thinking, sense-making, and discovery. And technical prowess, though it can be useful to a mathematician, is not the point of what we do. The other person that I want to sort of get a 35,000, sort of view from 35,000 feet is Mike Starbird, who was a graduate student, or a professor of mine in graduate school. And Mike says he wants to be very ambitious in his teaching. And he actually makes the startling statement that he actually does not care what his students can do at the time of the final exam. He only cares what they have with them 5 or 10 or 20 years after they leave his classroom. And so the question is, how do I build the ambition of things that my students will take into the future, into the mathematics that I have to teach them? And that's an awesome responsibility. By the way, it's a really hard responsibility, but we always need to be thinking, what is it that I'm doing that they will take with them when they go and keep with them in the years to come? The second person that I want to highlight is Stan Yoshinobu, who has been really the driving force in exponentiating the use of inquiry-based learning at the college level. The programs that he's developed are amazing in their effectiveness of helping people to incorporate inquiry into their classrooms. And what I learned from Stan is that teaching is first and foremost a human activity. So we're teaching mathematics, but we're teaching it in the context of complicated human interactions. So good communication, that's hard, right? Communication between you and your students, communication between your students, and all of these things, communication between the students themselves, these are all hard. But no mathematics is learned without embracing that difficulty. If we can't communicate, nobody learns mathematics. And this isn't even bringing up the fact that in our classrooms, some of our students deal with lack of self-confidence, a fixed versus a growth mindset, personal problems that may interfere with their ability to do what they need to do in our classrooms. These are all non-mathematical things, but we have to teach in the context of this messy, human, non-mathematical context, or we are not going to be able to teach them mathematics. So I want to talk about 2 women that have been a great influence on me. I had to pick and choose. Boy, it's hard. There have been many people in this community that have been great influences on me. But I want to say, pick 2 of them who said something at some point that really crystallized something incredibly valuable for me. So I was sort of touted as this expert in inquiry-based learning. And one time, not that long ago, by the way, Sudare said something to me that has really stuck with me and kind of made my jaw drop. And that was, that's active learning, but it is not inquiry. I think it's really easy to confuse active learning with inquiry. We all understand that we teach, that teaching doesn't really happen by some sort of magical transfer from the sage to the student, right? The students have to be actively engaged in their own learning, or they don't get much out of it. We all understand this. That's the secret to long-lasting learning. So active learning has been something that this community has embraced over the years, which is fantastic. But it may not be sufficient, because if you remember, what I said that Bob Esslinger gave to me is that at the center of mathematics is deep thinking, sense-making, and discovery. And the idea of having students discover mathematical connections is so profound and life-changing for them that we need to sort of incorporate that into our classes. So active learning is incredibly important. You know, if we've given them a couple of examples of, let's say, integration by substitution in a calculus class, it's perfectly fine to say, well, here are a couple of other examples. You might try this substitution, and that's really important, and they do that, and then they learn, and then they go on. But that is not inquiry. It's just active learning. They really aren't quite discovering much when they do that. So I'm just going to leave that here now, but I will point out that Sue has had a lot to say about easy ways or easier ways to ease inquiry into your classrooms, including a really nice paper that talks about taking ordinary assignments that are not inquiry assignments and finding ways of slightly modifying them so that they do involve more inquiry, so the students are answering questions. The person on the other side is Judy Holdner, who is also here. She's my colleague at Kenyon. She's been my closest colleague and very good friend at Kenyon for a quarter of a century. And if I even started to try to unpack everything I've learned from her about teaching, we would be here all day. And I only have 15 minutes. So I'm going to give you one thing that I've learned from Judy. And that is, we kind of all understand that if our students are having fun in our classes, they will learn more. Right? Again, it's non-mathematical, but if they're having fun, they're more likely to learn something. And Judy is creative and fun. The students love taking courses from Judy because she is really fun. I'm not fun. I evidently am scary. I don't know why I'm scary, but evidently now I'm scary. Judy is fun. And but I think it's easy to have fun sort of distract from our main mission, which is teaching mathematics. That's what we are there for. We are there for teaching mathematics. That doesn't mean you can't bring some brownies in sometime to make your students happy. But when you're building fun into your classroom, it better have a pedagogical point. Where in this is the mathematics that I'm teaching them? How is this going to help them extend the use of their mathematics, the mathematics that I'm trying to teach them? And Judy is awesome at creating these wonderful, whimsical, fantastic projects and assignments that are really kind of fun, and they help the students have a good time while learning mathematics. And we should all be doing that. Fortunately, because I told you, she's fun, I'm not fun, evidently I'm scary, I steal from her all the time. So I get to use things that she comes up with because she's cool. And I think that brings another point, which is that, did I say something about the fact that many of the best teachers on the face of the planet are in this room right now? And if you add the rest of the MAA, then you get kind of most of the rest of them. This is a place this is a group that is an inexhaustible source of wonder and play and good mathematics. So one of the things that brings me to the MAA and keeps me at the MAA is that I keep learning cool things about teaching from others, and I am not above, and you should not be above, stealing things from others. And if you're really lucky, every once in a while you get to add to the communal treasure and somebody learns from you. One of the great sort of privileges that I've had is to help a lot of faculty members from across the country in various ways learn to incorporate inquiry into their classes. Sometimes the very first steps through Project Next and talking to Project Next fellows, but also the IBL workshops that Stan has so beautifully put together. And so here you see some of these people at an IBL workshop. This one was actually at Kenyon, but there have been such workshops around the country, and they are wonderful. If you haven't had opportunity to participate in one, you should. I have to confess that I'm kind of cocky about my teaching, and when I go in to teach a bunch of people that have 25 years less experience teaching than I do, I sometimes forget that they have things to teach me. But I can tell you that every time I've been involved in one of these workshops, my classroom has been as enriched, if not more so, than the classrooms of the participants. And that brings to the next idea, which is that the most important thing that happens in our classrooms is not teaching. It is learning. And we should not forget that. And one of the best sources of introducing good, better teaching is to listen to our students. I'm trying to look at the clock, which I'm too short to see. Is to listen to our students, okay? I have learned so much about teaching by listening to my students. And one of the things that I want to tell you is that when I was a young faculty member, I was terrible at predicting which parts of the mathematics would be problematic for my students. I was bad. I think that they're going to have a lot of trouble with this. They had no trouble with that. This other thing, I had no idea. I was blindsided. I had no idea why they had trouble, or that they were even going to have trouble with that. So if you don't if you don't have your students talking about mathematics in your presence, by the way, you will never figure that out, because you talk out and they all go like this. And you think that they're understanding things, and maybe they aren't. And so I want to use a couple of metaphors to give you an example of this. And so this is a slide that I've used, and a few of you have probably seen it because I use it every once in a while. I live in terror of somebody coming up and saying, "How did you get my vacation slide?" Because I got it off the internet, but I don't know where it came from, and that was a long time ago, and now I'm nervous, but I'm addicted to this slide, so I have to use it. So tell me, when you look at this slide, what do you see? Okay, it seems to be in Asia. It seems to be a picture in Asia. Pretty soon, because I'm running out of time, I'm going to say almost every time I ever show this, eventually somebody comes up with welcome, right in the middle of the slide. Is that because that's the most important piece of that slide? No, it's because it's the only thing that looks familiar, and you're hanging on. I'm saying, what's there? And you're thinking, I don't know, there's all kinds of stuff there. What the hell are you talking about? And you hang on to whatever's familiar, not because it's important, but because it's familiar. And I think, no, obviously I'm interested in this guy's tie. Obviously, right? It's that guy's tie. That's what we're interested in here. And what happens is that when your students encounter a new mathematical idea, they see this picture, and they have no idea how to get to the tie. So if you say, okay, well, now we're going to talk about this guy's tie, they're perfectly willing to follow you down that rabbit hole, but they could never have gotten to the tie in the first place. Right? And getting to the tie is part of the way we unravel mathematics that we don't understand. Okay, that's the first thing. So the idea that trying to figure out trying to help the students understand what to focus on as a beginning thing it's a barrier. Not knowing what to focus on is a barrier to their mathematics. Helping them learn to find that focus is a door to the mathematics. Okay, well, I wanted to say one more thing about this, and the other analogy I want to talk about is a mud puddle. I'm still looking, I'm running out of time here, but I'm almost done. There's a very large mud puddle. There's a 6-foot deep mud puddle, and you're talking about some mathematics, and that that mud puddle is in the middle of your mathematical road, and you spend some time sort of telling your students that they're going to encounter a mud puddle, and this mud puddle is going to be very deep, so that when they get to the mud puddle, they should, turn right or turn left and go around and keep the mud puddle sort of in sight so they don't get in the mud puddle, and they go around it and they're going to be fine. But that's actually not what happens, because they were totally with you on the mud puddle, except they never saw the mud puddle coming. So one of the ways to get the students to the place where they can start making mathematical discoveries is to give them, let's say, exercises that get them to where they are in the mud puddle up to their calves. Not up to their neck, which is where they will end up, but up to their calves. And you move them there very deliberately. And when they're in the mud puddle up to their calves, then you've got their attention, and then they can start learning. They can start thinking about things. You can start then talking about, well, how do we get ourselves out of this? Rather than ending up in the middle of the mud puddle, how do we get ourselves out of this? And that's giving them the tools that we as mathematicians use when we don't know what's going on, which is, by the way, most of the time for me anyway, right? I get something, I build examples, I try to figure out what a definition means, I draw a picture. These are all skills that we have to teach them so that they can engage the mathematics. But what I can tell you is that if you give them that kind of intro into it, they will make amazing mathematical discoveries. They will discover the point that you have. You can't just sort of say, go forth and discover. You can't even say, well, this is the question we want to answer today. You have to give them a way into it, and then they can make the mathematical discovery, and that's good inquiry in the classroom. What you do in a liberal arts math class will be different than what you do in a real analysis class or a differential equations class, but the same principles apply. I want to finish by saying that sometimes we have students who go on to become teachers, and they become colleagues, and that is just so cool. And if you're very, very lucky, one of your kids will go on to become a teacher. So this is my daughter, Sarah. Sorry, I'm going to tear up now. And Sarah's a high school teacher, and when she started teaching high school, she came up with a set of axioms for her classroom, and they are there. The axioms are: everyone can learn math. Everyone can love math. The way to learn math is to do math. Mistakes are normal and important. Success is what you keep. And we're all in this together. And that is, I think, a great way to conduct our classes. Thank you very much.
All right, it gives me a great pleasure to introduce our second Haimo Lecture awardee, Dr. Adriana Salerno, who is an exemplary mathematician and educator, who cares deeply about her students and who invests a lot of time and energy creating a welcoming atmosphere in her classes so that her students can thrive. She is a leader within her institution as well as at the national and international level. She works tirelessly to create more inclusive environments for students inside the classroom for all of us in the mathematics community. Inside the classroom, Dr. Salerno is an enthusiastic, passionate, devoted, and creative teacher due to her willingness to be human and connect with her students. Her colleagues and students attest to the fact that the atmosphere in her classroom is delightful. There is laughter, almost universal participation, lots of good questions, and camaraderie. Her passion for making the mathematics community extends to her work co-founding and writing for the AMS Inclusion Exclusion blog, which has played an important role in getting the mathematics community to critically examine its practices. Dr. Salerno is also an internationally sought-after educator who has taught a mini course on p-adic numbers in Dangbo, Benin, a class on lattices and cryptography, and Abidjan Cote de la Ivoire, there we go, and a class on algebraic number theory in Turkey, among many other talks and lectures around the world. And of course, Dr. Salerno is currently the MAA Vice President. Please help me to join and to welcome Dr. Adriana Salerno to the podium.
Thank you. Thank you, Tencia. Thank you, everybody, for being here. Thank you, Carol, for a lovely talk. I'm in awe of you. I've always been. So it's a very humbling and honoring experience to be sharing this with Carol and with Sarah Cook. Yes, thank you so much. And I'm really glad I didn't remember that Francis's lesson of grace and teaching was this, because I would have been much more nervous than I already am. Anyway, I'm very excited to be here. And but it was intimidating, right? Like Carol said, it's sort of a big moment, and you don't really know what to do with it, because a really important part of being a math professor is that you know that you don't know everything and that you have still a lot to know and to learn and to grow, right? And so getting an award like this is always like, but why? I'll be better later, you know? So it's a little strange, but I mean, I'm very, very honored. And while I was thinking about this talk, I was really stuck. I didn't know what to talk about. There was like so many stories I can tell, so many people to thank, so many pictures from my classes. I kind of, you know, did the thing you do on Twitter, like the doom scrolling, but through my own computer to just try to see what I could talk about. And I landed on this, on my teaching statement from when I was on the job market. I found that document to have like some things that I expected to find in there and some surprises. And then I remembered one thing that I tell my students all the time. At the end of the semester, I will say, look how far you've come, right? Look all you've learned. Look, a month ago, you didn't even know what to do with that epsilon, right? And so this idea of like, look what you can do now. And so I'm trying to do this for myself, and this is an exercise that I want to share sort of publicly, so it's a little bit intimidating in that way, but I wanted you to join me in exploring my teaching statement and where I am now compared to then. So this is the first line of my teaching statement. That was bold. I don't know why. I was possessed to start with math is hard. I've read many teaching statements since, and I don't know how I would react to this one. But this was sort of couched in this quote by Rainer Maria Rilke, that something is difficult should be reason enough to do it. This is from his Letters to a Young Poet book. If you're not familiar with this book, it is essentially a one-sided correspondence that he corresponded with a young poet, spoiler alert, and it became sort of this really beautiful mentoring relationship where he gives advice on, you know, writing poetry, but also on love, on relationships, on loneliness, on religion, you know, so it's really a really beautiful thing. I got this for my 15th birthday from my older sister, and I still, you know, go back to it every once in a while. And this is from the letter that he writes on love. And in that, he says that difficult things are usually also really meaningful things, and vice versa. Really meaningful things are hard by nature. And so that this was my thesis in my teaching statement was, math is hard, but it is worth the effort. And then my mission as an instructor is to show students that it is worth that effort, right? And that it's meaningful. But, so the title of my talk is Teaching Math is Hard, because it is also a very meaningful activity that is, at times, very difficult, but it is worth the effort. Anyway, and a side note, every single letter starts with, I am so sorry it has taken me so long to respond, which I think many of us can relate to, and which you have read in emails from me many times. Anyway, this is very relatable. So one thing that I thought I had pretty early on, very clear in my mind, is that learning mathematics happens in community. Right? This is, the things in the white boxes will be direct quotes from my teaching statement. I won't read them, but they're just giving you the idea of what was in there. And so I really understood this. And I think I was lucky in the same way that Carol was lucky. We went to graduate school at the University of Texas at Austin, where we had some people who cared a lot about active learning and about including students in their own learning, right? Really centering students. And so one of these people is Uri Treisman, director or retired director of the Dana Center, but he was behind this sort of style of doing sort of companion classes to calculus classes called the Emerging Scholars Program, right? And so I taught one of these sections with him. There's a huge lecture, and then I taught about 20 of these students in a sort of longer discussion section than the usual, like, I'll tell you how to do the homework problems, but really, really active, engaging with the problems. He's sort of a pioneer in like really using active learning as a tool for equity in the classroom. And so it was a huge privilege that I had to learn from him directly. And of course, Mike Starboard, who we've heard from a little bit, or about a little bit. And I took my first ever inquiry-based learning class was an algebraic topology class that I thought was the most fun I ever had. I was so excited to just go and look at these notes and have no idea what I was doing and to talk about, like, I don't know that most of my students have not reacted this way when I've made them do it, but it was really, I had come from a long tradition in Venezuela of just being lectured at, and this was so empowering and so fun. And so, I mean, I definitely had this sense already in my going into my teaching job. I have continued to do this in my classes at Bates. I've been doing sort of more traditional style inquiry-based learning. Active learning is not inquiry, but I've done also as different flavors of active learning. I've been using team-based learning, which is like a trademark thing, so I should have put a TM there, but it is another way of doing this. I've tried to incorporate technology and experimentation in some of my classes, so in our number theory class, we end up doing a lot of coding on Python and Sage as part of the inquiry. And I've tried to incorporate a lot of the element of play. I do use Judy Holdner's cryptography scavenger hunt and in my number theory classes. It's really exciting to be sort of sharing this here. And this is from my Great Ideas in Mathematics class, which is a sort of math for liberal arts students. And they are using CipherDisk to decode some message. And I basically made like a little escape room activity for them using ciphers. And anyway, so this is really a key part of how I teach, and it clearly has always been. This is one part where I was just like, yeah, I think I knew where I wanted to go with that. There are parts that are not so clear, so like I had like some sense of wanting to do stuff with metacognition, but I had no idea. I had never like thought of that word. I didn't really know what I was doing, but I had students, you know, write their thought process next to their math homework, so that because I noticed that they were just writing down symbols without really understanding what was going on. And I'm just like, just tell me in a sentence right next to it what you did. Just say, I added 2 because this, right? And so I noticed that made things much better. And this was like a huge part of my teaching statement. It's like, I figured this out on my own. I did not, well, I mean, I discovered this idea, but then I discovered that there were people who knew this way better than I did, and that was really good. I've done many things that incorporate that type of metacognition in class. One of my favorite activities, which you can barely see, is using Ken Bain's What the Best College Students Do, some chapters from that book, and really having them write a response or sort of an essay related to their exam, right? And so instead of like do the math all over again or tell me what you did wrong, is like tell me what you have learned from like the things you didn't understand. Like tell me like the sort of success from failure kind of stuff. This is not my activity. I owe this to Brian Katz, BK, sitting over there, and yeah, it was hugely helpful to have like a really good friend who knows a lot. Like he knows so much about metacognition, and he gets students to really think about their thought processes and like really meta think about what they're doing in the classroom in really beautiful ways. A student of mine, Ariel Lamb, and I she did a thesis, a senior thesis on trying to incorporate metacognition into the calculus sequence, which we were hoping like we could turn into then modules that other faculty could use. And a lot of that was based on work by Sonia Gamby, who is actually a chemistry professor in North Shore Community College, and a former WNBA star. So, you know, people could have lots of stories to bring. She is a fantastic like thinker about this type of metacognition, but for very specific, clear goals of like getting students to understand and like using this also as a tool for equity and inclusion. I think there was a sense in which I knew that having relevant examples was useful for students, and so I've continued to use this. I've done this in a couple of ways. I've taught a Pick Math class. Pick Math is a brainchild of Susie Weeks and Michael Dorff. to amazing humans also. And this is sort of a way in which I realized, they realized, and I have used this for my students, that, that you can really engage students in applied mathematics, but in a way that is very clearly going to be helpful to them in the workplace, right? Like it is directly, you pair up with industry partners or nonprofits. In my case, they were regional, local nonprofits. And the students got problems from the nonprofits, and they had to figure out how to answer those questions. It was very messy. One of my students said, this is a great class, but mostly I was cleaning data, and I'm like, this might be what you end up doing for work anyways, cleaning data sets, right? And so, but it was a really, really fun class to teach in the sense that this is mathematics that is relevant to their employment later on, right? Like this is math in the use of their future. And so I thought that was really great. Another way in which I have thought about using relevant examples is in the other direction, is mathematics in the use of the public, the common good, right? Like how do we use mathematics to make a better world, right? And so I started teaching a class on math for social justice. This was not my invention. My colleague Bonnie Schulman had been teaching this class for a long time, and then we stopped teaching it. But she is an activist, a really amazing person. She is very connected in the community. She's just one of these people who are like just a force for good, and she has been a really great mentor to have. And then my colleague Katie Ott and I, Katie, by the way, just won the Bates-wide Teaching Award, so very excited for that. And Katie and I developed this class for Bates, like sort of for a more up-to-date version, and it hadn't been taught in a while, so we sort of redeveloped this class on math for social justice. And the students are responding so well to it because they're just desperate for ways in which to connect mathematics to the world, but also this idea of connecting mathematics and making the world better was huge. I can't talk about math for social justice, I'm gonna cry, without mentioning Kanan in shape. He died a few weeks ago. He was 34. But he's huge. I'm sorry, I even misgendered them. They were a huge, huge force for the math for social justice community. I emailed them out of the blue because I only knew them through Twitter, and I said, look, I'm planning this math for social justice class, and they said, here are all my materials. Use whatever you want, however you want. If you have questions, ask me questions, and I did, and they did. So another thing I want to mention is Kenan was a non-binary Turkish-American mathematician and was a poet and was an activist, in particular related to trans rights and non-binary, trans and non-binary people's rights. And so I was thinking about what they would want me to say today. And so I'm not going to talk about Florida, but I am going to talk about the fact that trans rights are under attack in the whole country, not just here. This is a problem that we're all facing and that we're all going to face when we go home to wherever we're from. And so I can't, I think they would want me to say that we need to make mathematics and the world safe for people like them. And so here is something that I dug through their Twitter feed. And this is something that they shared on Trans Day of Visibility. It's a link to an article in Them magazine on how to protect trans rights in every state. And I would love it if you all could think about how, not Florida, how the whole country can benefit, or Florida if you're from here, but how the whole country can benefit from the lessons that Kenan left us. Okay. I also saw very small seeds or shadows of what would become standards-based grading. I have this very bold statement saying, no teacher can deny that grading is important. I actually do deny it now. But, but then that grades are not the end goal. I was very clear that the grades are not the end goal. The grades are how I'm measuring something, right? And I do think, I thought it then and I still think it now, that tests and those kinds of things do teach something. And so I'm not denying that. I was clear, and like students are so focused on the grade and not so much focused on what they're doing in that direction. But for a very long time, I did not understand that if I really wanted to instill a growth mindset and some sense of like, you know, development and some rewarding of the development, that I was really still just holding them to a grade. And so I started really trying to incorporate incorporate standard-based grading. Spencer Bagley put it best. He says, this is basically like a quality control, so we grade beef, we should not grade students. So I love that expression. And I've learned a lot from Spencer about standards-based grading, and also from Drew Lewis. And from Drew Lewis specifically in the context of inquiry-based learning and team-based learning, he has developed a lot of really cool materials related to that. And so, I can see that like my brain wanted that to exist, but I had no idea what it was. And I think it developed while I was at Bates. I did a mass media fellowship in the Voice of America when I was in 2 years before I graduated from Texas, and I really was. I thought I was going to do more of this, the kind of like, oh, I'm going to write, you know, expository stuff. I've done some of that, but not as much as I at that point thought I would do. But one thing I have done is I took all of that experience and I brought it back into my classroom. And so now I've taught a bunch of writing courses in the context of mathematics. So I've taught a first-year seminar called The Communication Equation, which is kind of a tongue twister, the Mathematical Media Tour. And so it's a first-year writing class, and so it's their you know, first college writing class, but in the context of mathematics and understanding mathematics in the media, you know, like the stereotypes of mathematicians, how do we write about mathematics, how do we write mathematics in ways that other people understand it. And so that's one course that I've loved taking. That doesn't look very active, and it's because they're responding to some prompts that I gave them on the reading. But we still sat in a circle and had conversations eventually. And I learned a lot about how to design this class. I borrowed a lot from Susan Colley, who was also the editor-in-chief of the monthly for a while, until recently, actually. And she gave me so many good materials. I have also taught a sophomore-junior writing seminar in which students are sort of now like 2 years in, they've taken their first proofs-based course, and so now they're really trying to understand how to write like mathematicians. In that picture, they're all mapping out with sticky notes their final papers. And so we do a lot of the sort of moving around the classroom, not just writing. I definitely saw some seeds of equity work and rehumanizing math. But that one is probably one of the weakest of all the sort of things that are big pillars of my teaching. And I really want to point out like how terrible it is that I said that, you know, I'm creating a friendly classroom. Like this was cited by Tensia as something that people like really appreciate in my classroom. And I was downplaying it as like, in my teaching statement, as like, well, it's not that important. I mean, I do that well, but it's not that important. And then we do know that this is huge, and then people have said this better than I, like Francis Sue in his Lessons of Grace and Teaching, you know, in the sense of like actually feeling good and feeling happy about being in a classroom and feeling that as a friendly atmosphere is really, really important. I missed a lot there. I learned a lot from Rochelle Gutierrez. This is a picture of when she visited Bates. And these are 3 students of ours, Ariel Lam again, Ali Green, and Jesus Carrera. They were so excited to meet her. They were sort of like so inspired by everything she had to say. Rochelle is really good at like getting people to think about how students bring their whole selves into the classroom and their stories and their lives, and every single part of them needs to be a part of the classroom experience. Federico Ardila has been really good at like teaching me about rituals, like bringing in rituals into the classroom, starting with music, right? Like having students pick a song. We have playlists. I have playlists from different classes, and I like will rotate among them because they're so fun. Another ritual I started was like, let's show me a picture of your hometown, and let's project it in the classroom TV or whatever, if we had one of those. Other people I've learned from, Courtney Gibbons, who is now a congressional fellow for the AAAS, and she taught me a lot about how to get students to write mathematical autobiographies. I know lots of people do this, but she is the person I borrowed this from. Like Carol said, we borrow from everybody. Kimberly Tanner, also taught me, I will, there's so many people to thank. Carrie Diaz-Eaton has been a huge partner for me at Bates on thinking about equity and pushing things at Bates. She is a fantastic colleague to have. Piper H. and BK and all the people who worked with me on the Inclusion Exclusion blog, really, we pushed each other to think about how mathematics can be more equitable and more inclusive. And this sentence, I've repeated this to many people many times, that treating everyone equally is not the same as treating everyone fairly. One glaring omission, I feel like rushed now because I'm out of time, but one glaring omission that I will tell you about is that I had no idea that I needed my students to buy into the many things I did in class. And so I remember teaching a real analysis class that went off the rails very quickly because I was like, here are a set of theorems that you must prove. It will be good for you. And I did nothing else. And Meredith, sitting over there, had to do a lot of cleanup with that class because my students would go over to her and be like, I don't know what she's doing, but it's horrible, she's torturing me. And so I have learned now to set the stage at the beginning of class and to really make the students partners in designing the course with me. And I've actually adjusted how I do some things based on the things that I hear from them on the first day of class. And that has been hugely important. I learned that from Dana Ernst. And then teaching math is hard. And I think that it's really important to know I had a growth mindset about my students, and I think I forgot to have a growth mindset about myself. That you don't know everything, that you are growing, that you are improving, and that all of these failures are teaching you something. So until this moment, my biggest honor was my students once brought a cake with my face on it to class. So I wanted to show you that too. And I mean, yeah, so Tensia sitting over there is like the music playing at the Oscars, right? Like, I know I've run out of time. Here's a list of all the wonderful people who have helped me. I had names on all the pictures, so I felt like I should tell you who Sandra Bullock is. I've held that Oscar. You can ask me about that later. So I just want to wrap up with the next 15 years. The quote that I used was that something is difficult should be reason enough to do it. I think that was a really useful quote for me then. But now that I'm thinking about what comes next and what am I doing next, I want to leave you with this quote. In this, there is no measuring with time. A year doesn't matter, and 10 years are nothing. Being a teacher means not numbering and counting, but ripening like a tree, which doesn't force its sap and stands confidently in the storms of spring, not afraid that afterward summer may not come. It does come, but it comes only to those who are patient. Thank you.
All right, it gives me a great pleasure to introduce our third Haimo winner, Dr. Sarah Cook, who is an inspirational teacher and whose influence extends, from elementary school to graduate school. She is a tireless and relentless advocate for mathematics who leverages the power of communities to support, encourage, and inspire all students, especially those who are typically underrepresented in the STEM discipline. This focus on community informs her work at the graduate level, at the undergraduate level, and most impressively at the elementary and secondary levels in under-resourced school districts in the Ann Arbor area. In the words of a nominator, Sarah is an irrepressible force of nature. I love this next part. Unceasingly upbeat, endlessly enthusiastic, supremely supportive, and intensely innovative. Dr. Cook works with I hope I say this correctly, Ypsilanti Community Middle School, a predominantly African-American middle school near Ann Arbor, to provide instruction and support of their mathematics curriculum. On a bi-weekly basis, Dr. Cook and groups of about 20 University of Michigan students travel to the schools to provide tutoring and additional instruction for about 2 hours per session. To support this work and these students, she founded the Ypsilanti Math Corps to provide a supportive community that uses engagement in mathematics to inspire students to envision themselves as active participants in the STEM discipline beyond high school and college. Similarly, her on-campus work focuses on building community for students who are typically underrepresented in the STEM disciplines. She organizes multiple student groups, includes FEMS, a student group dedicated to closing gender and racial divides in the STEM disciplines. Using inquiry-based methods, she works hard to create a sense of community and belonging in her classes by encouraging collaboration and making it clear that any student, irrespective of prior mathematical background, could succeed with hard work and dedication. It gives me a great pleasure to present to you Dr. Sarah Cook.
Well, thank you very much for that introduction. Thank you very much for this honor. I am humbled to be here, and thank you to my fellow awardees, Adriana and Carol. Thank you for your presentations. They were wonderful and amazing. And thank you all for being here and listening to me. I'm going to talk to you today about chaos. So by chaos, I mean two different things, or two different parts of my life as a mathematician. There's the research mathematician part. So I do research in complex dynamical systems, where I typically iterate a holomorphic map on a complex space. And when you do this, that space breaks naturally into two parts: the stable part, the region of stability, and then the unstable or chaotic part. And on this title slide, you can see some of these chaotic pieces. Those fractal pieces are Julia sets of various rational functions. So that's my life as a researcher. I was very fortunate enough to get more chaos in my life over the past 5 years by directing a math corps camp at the University of Michigan. So what I'd like to do with my time with you today is talk a little bit about that camp, what it is, and what it means to me, and how I found it, and how it started. So the story begins in March of 2018. I was invited by a friend and colleague, Eunice Zetuncu, who works at the University of Michigan at the Dearborn campus. He invited me to lead a math circle session for some students that he works with. And I will show you what he wrote in his invitation email. It was this: we have about 15 to 20 students attending the sessions. They're all from the same school in Detroit. Their mathematical abilities are quite different from the math circle crowd in Ann Arbor. I was informed at the last meeting that the math teacher for these kids quit. This was the second math teacher to quit this year. The first one left in the fall, and it looks like they won't have a teacher for a while. I had to read that like 10 times before I finally absorbed what it was saying. I couldn't believe that there would be kids in school that would have no teacher. And if there are kids in school that have no teacher, then why aren't we all outraged about it? And why aren't we talking about it? I sort of found out about this accidentally because I got an invitation. I work in a wonderful math department that's full of people who like to do lots and lots of outreach. So I took this back to them. And I said, okay, we're going to try to do something to help support some of these students. We learned through another math circle program, a math circle program for teachers, that there's a school in Ypsilanti, Michigan, that's only 8 miles away from the math department at U of M, where they couldn't keep a math teacher for more than 2 weeks at a time. So the teachers would show up, and then they would be with the kids for a while, and then they'd leave. And then another teacher would show up and be with the kids for a while, and then they'd leave. And this kept happening. And the kids, they don't get to leave. They stay. And so, as you heard in the introduction, I, with my wonderful colleague and friend Stephen DeBacker, started the Math Mondays in IPSI program, where a bunch of us would go to the middle school to offer mathematical support in any way that we could for the kids who were affected by this terrible teacher shortage. Before that started, though, I thought to myself, okay, we're partnering with some of the teachers at that school. We're going to go in and we're going to work with these middle school students. I don't know anything about middle school students. I teach college students. So I have something to learn. So I looked around for programs that could possibly help in this outreach effort, and I heard about one. And it changed my entire life. It's called the Math Corps. So in August of 2018, I went to their Visitors Day, and I attended. The Math Corps is a summer camp for middle school kids and high school mentors. It was founded in 1992 at Wayne State University in Detroit. It was founded by Stephen Kahn and Leonard Boehm, who work in that math department. And it is still going strong every summer. 90% of the kids who go to that program will graduate from high school, and of those, 90% will go to college. When I went there on that day in August, I walked in and I saw kids doing things with their hands like this and like this. They were in their classes and they could not get to the board fast enough to answer a question. They were dancing in their chairs and they were so excited to be part of that camp and to be doing mathematics with each other, and they were having fun. And I thought to myself, this is what we are going to bring back to our kids, the kids we are helping and working with at that school. So Stephen and I contacted Steve Kahn, and we said, how do we start one of these? We want to start one for the kids that we work with. And he said, okay, go for it. So in summer 2019, we ran a pilot version of the program. We had 20 rising 7th graders, 20 rising 8th graders, and 20 high school students in our camp that year. This graph that you see with all the slopes, every single one of those line segments represents one of our middle schoolers. The left endpoint is their pre-test score. The right endpoint is their post-test score. That first camp was only 4 weeks long, which meant that we only had 16 days with them. We only meet 4 days a week. In 16 days, every single camper improved, and their average test score tripled. Even better, the kids all said, we want to come back next year. That was amazing. I got so excited that I called up Steve Kahn, the founder of the program, and I said, it works, it works, it works. And he said, yes, I know that it works. And then he said this. When I started this program in 1992, I thought the real tragedy is that there are 7th graders who couldn't subtract. And then he said, that's not what the real tragedy is. The real tragedy is that they can. And it took a second for that to land with me. It's a rather poignant sentiment. His point being, look at what your Math Corps kids did in just 4 weeks. Look at what they did. Imagine what they could do if they were given the proper support in school. So after that, I knew we had to keep this program running. I want to point out also, there's Nehemiah there, if you can see on the slide, Nehemiah. He shows up in a couple more slides. He was a 7th grader back in 2019 when our program started. I'll tell you a little bit about why the Math Corps works so well, the Math Corps magic. It starts with this. There are 3 rules for campers. They know them well. Rule number 1, be yourself. Rule number 2, always strive to realize your own greatness. And rule number 3, be safe. So you might be thinking, oh, those are like typical summer camp rules, at least maybe number 1 and number 3. Number 2 sounds a little strange, maybe. Number 2 is worded that way because this camp and everything we do in this camp is based on the principle that every child possesses a unique and inherent greatness inside. And our job in working in the camp is to help those kids realize their greatness. That's what we do, and we use mathematics to do that. So this is not a math camp. This is a kid camp where we use math to celebrate children. That's part of the reason it's so effective. 3 rules for kids. You might ask, okay, well, how many rules are there for the staff? There are 101. And I'll just read some of these. So let's see. Admit mistakes to kids, number 78. Number 48, appreciate kids. Number 16, mentor kids. Number 26, challenge kids. Number 67, be proud of kids. 35, talk to kids. 36, push kids. Number 70, encourage kids. Number 73, grow with kids, play with kids. So you can probably tell from these rules, the spirit of the camp is very positive, very family-oriented. We peer pressure the kids up, and we celebrate them all the time. I mentioned this hand signal to you. When I visited the Detroit site, I saw the kids going like this. This is the most important thing in camp. This is the support signal. Anytime a kid in the camp goes up to a board to offer an answer, the entire room goes like this. Nobody's looking at their phone, looking at the clock, tying their shoe. Everybody's eyes are on that kid, and everybody is going like this. And that means I support you. This is extremely powerful in a room full of 200 people when you have one kid who gets up and maybe shares something painful, like their grandmother died last week or something. So part of the Math Core magic is this family, very positive, very supportive atmosphere. Another part of the Math Core magic is the structure itself. The kids learn in teams. Every team consists of 10 middle school campers, 5 high school students, those are our teaching assistants or TAs, and 1 college student who's the leader. Every high school student is paired with 2 middle school students for the whole summer. And they do math together, and their relationship evolves into sort of a younger sibling, older sibling, kids teaching kids, kids caring about kids. The idea is everybody has someone to look up to and someone to learn from. So the middle school kids see themselves in the high school kids see themselves in the college kids. And then another thing that works really well in the camp is that the kids come back every summer. So a 7th grader might be looking at the high school TA and say, I'm gonna be that person someday when I come back. When you're in the Math Core, you're in it for life. And we hope that you come back every single summer. And we've had some kids do that and grow up with us, grow up with our camp. So you remember Nehemiah, who was a 7th grader in 2019? There he is as a high school TA. These are pictures from last summer. So you can see just from these images the kind of vibe that the camp has. I should also confess that the reason I flew in only this morning and have to leave at 4 a.m. tomorrow is because we are 4 weeks in out of a 5-week camp, and I've got to get home and take care of my campers. We have 1 week left to go. Here's a couple other photos. In the upper right, you'll see Malik. Malik has also been with us since he was a 7th grader back in 2019. There he is on Zoom. After the summer camp ends, we run a program on Saturday mornings, and we invite anybody to hop on just for educational support. And we keep up with a lot of our campers through the school year that way. And Malik is showing us his Student of the Month certificate, which was amazing. Okay. So I want to point out that this is not like school. Again, it's not a math camp, it's a kid camp where we use math to celebrate kids. So the kids are doing their homework, and they're learning math, and they're taking tests, and they're taking quizzes, but they're also doing art projects and making paper airplanes and throwing around giant beach balls, because it's also camp, and it's fun. And a lot of them will tell you their favorite thing is the ice cream machine in the dining hall. Okay, so here are a couple quotes just from our program evaluations. Overall, I'm feeling very happy and proud. This experience has been amazing, and it has left an incredibly positive impact on myself. Every day, no matter what, there's an emphasis on striving to achieve your own greatness, and the belief that there is potential in everybody truly encourages me to be my better self. I liked it a lot because it prepared me for high school, and now I can help my other friends in algebra who struggle. I love it. I'll be back. Okay. And I'd like to just kind of end by saying, maybe I'll leave this slide up for a couple more minutes. The camp is very exportable. So if you'd like to start a Math Corps site, wherever you work, the Wayne State site will happily and generously give you all of their materials. The only thing that they ask is that you stay faithful to the Math Corps philosophy of loving and believing in kids. In fact, Joanna's a friend and colleague of mine who just started a Math Corps site at the University of South Alabama this year. She worked with us last year at our site, and she just finished. And I heard it went really well. Yeah. So if you're interested in any of this, I'd be happy to talk with you about what it's like to start one. It's the most amazing thing I've ever seen. It's more effective than anything else I have seen that has these kinds of goals. And that's in my 20 plus years as an educator. And I'll mention that there's a Math Corps site at Cleveland State that's been running for 11 or 12 years. I find this to be a very powerful message that I wanted to end with. So it's from a college student who's in college at Northwestern, and before that she was a TA, a teaching assistant, high school teaching assistant at the Math Corps site in Cleveland, and here's what she says. I've never forgotten the impact Math Corps has had on my life. In short, I had a pretty negative experience at my high school. I dealt with bullying, self-harm, family issues, etc., and I struggled to make friends or maintain a healthy support system. This led me to believe that something was wrong with me, yet Math Corps completely altered that belief. Math Corps was my safe haven, for I made amazing friends, connected with the kindest mentors, and felt wholeheartedly happy for the first time in years. Math Corps helped me see that I can truly make a difference in the world if I just set my mind to it, a realization that allowed me to feel both hopeful and excited for the future. Honestly, my self-harm was so bad that I don't think I would have made it through high school without the kindness, love, and support from my Math Corps family. Today, I'm much happier at Northwestern, and I truly feel proud of the person I've become. However, that person would not exist without Math Corps. So I was wondering if I could help you impact other students' lives in the same way you impacted mine. So she was reaching out to say, how can I help now? This changed my life, and I want to share it with other people. And with that, I will close this talk with our dismissal at camp, which is, thank you and have a beautiful day by creating a beautiful day.
I can't imagine a better talk to end this celebration. Thank you so much. You're doing amazing work. And earlier we were talking about paying it forward, and I think that this just emulates that message. So thank you so much for your work. We do have time for a few questions. I'm sure there are many, like, how do we get started? Like, what's the cost startup? That's what I want to know.
That's a great question, and it kind of varies depending on the size of your camp, right? How much does it cost? So our pilot year, we ran 4 weeks, and you meet Monday through Thursday. And Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, those are sort of recovery to get ready for the next week. I'm not gonna lie to you, this is intense. You heard those messages, so you would expect some of these kids are coming to camp and they have a lot that they're carrying with them. And our job is to help them kind of leave it at the door and just be kids for a bit. And that can get pretty real pretty fast. So there's the financial cost, which, let's see, you pay, the TAs, the high school students get a small stipend for their work, so they're working as mentors and tutors, but they're also campers because they're kids themselves. They take classes and stuff. I think our startup cost, Joanna, do you remember what your cost was? You just finished a new one. I think it's probably, it depends on if you need buses. Those are darn expensive if you do. If you don't, I would say maybe like 80,000. You have to hire college students, you have to hire teachers. It depends on if you're providing meals. But Detroit, Wayne State Detroit has all of this. It's all broken down, and they will give it to you. They will say, here's what you need to raise. They also might provide some financial support because they're really good at fundraising. So they can help get your camp off the ground. They'll say you need these people for these jobs and those people for these jobs, and they have descriptions of everything. So they will give you everything you need. You just need to find people to do it. And it's, like I said, it's intense, but it's beautiful, beautiful work.
This is really fantastic. I mean, just unbelievable work. But I wonder if you might consider bringing some of these students with you to MathFest next year or the following year.
I'm sure they would love to come. That's a great idea. Actually, we just had a visitor day, and I should advertise it to anybody who wants to come to Ann Arbor and come and see our camp. You're welcome to do that and talk with our kids. But I love that idea. That's a great idea.
Yeah, it'd be
definitely
fantastic.
Done that.
I mean, even the high school and college students, any group of them.
Yeah, absolutely. They would have loved that. Or maybe some alumni, so they could come and tell you what the program has meant to them. Thank you. That's a great idea.
Thank you. Other questions? Yeah, Sydney.
Sure. That's a great question. So the two questions are the lead time. So when you get this packet from Wayne State that says in order to run your camp, you need to do X, Y, and Z, how much time should you prepare for that? I can tell you in my experience, we got that in the fall, and then we were ready to go by the following summer. So, but that was for our pilot program, the 4 weeks, the smaller camp. So we got it in October, all the stuff from Wayne State, and then we were ready to go once we had the funding. So those of you who have NSF career grants, the NSF, I used my career grant to pay for the first summer, and also some funds from the University of Michigan. And since then, after it worked that first time, we started to get attention, and then U of M was like, oh, maybe we should put some more resources behind this. They still haven't promised a forever funding situation. I'm working on that. But the NSF is sympathetic to this effort for sure, and so if you can find some funding that way, you can use that. So I would say from the fall to July, we were ready to go. But if you have a good team, it makes it a little easier. And then the other question was the culture. Yes, that's a huge part of it. And when the kids kind of grow up in the program, that's very powerful for the culture, like the hand signals and sort of the way that the Math Corps way of handling and solving problems and thinking about what the kids need. When we first started, we had kind of no idea what we were doing. But one thing that really helped was we had some folks who are alumni of the program who grew up at the Wayne State site. They worked with us. They came to our camp to work with us. And I think Joanna had someone from Wayne State with her. So when you get the folks who are used to it, they can help kind of build that culture, especially if you're a brand new site, and they're very willing to kind of put their folks around. There's a site at Spelman College, there's Joanna's new site, there's a site at Oakland University, U of M Dearborn, U of M Ann Arbor, Cleveland State. So they are sprouting up in lots and lots of places. And I think, to my mind, that's all to the good. I think these are wonderful.
Thanks again so much for that beautiful talk, Sarah. We really appreciate it. Let's thank her one more time.